is select chair and vice chair, and then talk about the agenda for this interim as well as date. Once we get a chairman selected, I'm going to bow out. I'm feeling like warmed over death, so I'm sitting over here. So good luck to you, but let's go ahead, Ian, with roll call.
Ian, did you want me to call the roll?
Do you have a list?
I can call the roll if you'd like.
Okay, go ahead.
Representative Harshman.
Excused.
Representative Knapp.
Here.
Representative Obermueller.
Here.
Representative Storer.
Excused.
Representative Walters.
Here.
Senator Driscoll.
Excused.
Senator Furphy.
Here.
Senator Guru.
Here.
Senator Hicks.
Here.
Senator Nethercott. Senator Steinmetz.
Here.
Acting Chair Larson.
Here. So committee will open the floor up for nominations for chair, vice chair. Senator Hicks.
Representative Larson, I had this discussion earlier with LSO. Some of the committees rotate 2 years House, 2 years Senate. Historically, this committee hasn't necessarily followed that, but the Senate did. Senator Perkins had chaired it the last 2 years. So just to get the process started, I would nominate Jerry Obermiller to chair CAPFIN for the next 2 years.
And I would nominate Tara Nethercott as vice chair.
Those motions are in order. Is there seconds? Okay. Let's take roll call.
Thank you. You caught me off guard. Thank you. Representative Harshman excused. Representative Knapp?
Aye.
Representative Obermueller?
Aye.
Representative Storer?
Aye.
Representative Walters?
Aye.
Senator Driscoll excused. Senator Furphy?
Aye.
Senator Guru?
Aye.
Senator Hicks?
Aye.
Senator Nethercott?
Aye.
Senator Steinmetz?
Aye.
Acting Chair Larson?
Aye. Thank you. Congratulations, Chairman Obermueller and Vice Chairman Nethercott. I will turn it over to you and duck out with your permission.
You are excused, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Get to feeling better. Yeah,
I'll send it to you.
sounds good, thanks.
Well, thank you very much, committee. Appreciate it. Welcome, everybody that's here for the meeting today. We're here to discuss interim topics. And I believe, does everyone have a handout of what these topics are?
Mr. Chairman, it's Ian out here.
Yes,
I
Ian.
apologize for interrupting you. I just wanted to make clear that the interim topics you have, because we're a select committee, we don't have the same online form available to everyone to submit interim topics. So I believe Senator Hicks submitted some topics that are included in this list, and the rest of this is an informal list that LSO just came up with, things that were aware of. So I just wanted to make it clear that this is a rather informal list in front of you.
Right. Okay, thank you. I think we'll go with senators, representatives that have things on this list. Senator Hicks, do you want to cover yours?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, so if we go to item number 5, this is incentive compensation for back office, whole office, and the state treasurer's office. Initially, I had submitted for the back office. CAPFIN is looking as to how do we provide currently the incentive compensation practices for the investment staff within the state treasurer's office and also within WRS, Wyoming Retirement System. A lot of other places in other states, what they do is even the back office, which when we're talking about that, it tends to be the accounting folks that work in the back and do all the, what I want to say, truing up the accounts and making sure all the transactions are okay. What we've seen in the past with some of the analysis that CAPFIN has looked at, some states provide a percentage of that incentive compensation to those folks too. And so that was to say, let's take a look at that. it's the whole team. And then the addition, the chief executive asked that we include the whole office incentive compensation package stuff. There's some issues there that we may want to look at as to how that's calculated and rewarded. So it's basically the incentive compensation program if we include the chief executive's request on there for not only just the back office, but the whole office, which is the investment staff. And an extension of that, we probably would want to include WRS associated with that. In other words, we don't want to have one investment team that's getting employment compensation with the treasurer's office and WRS, right? Retirement system has a completely different arrangement between front and back office. So, Mr. Chairman, what I would suggest that we amend that to include state treasurers and the Wyoming retirement system in reviewing both the back and whole office and investment compensation program.
Anyone have questions for Senator Hicks? Want to move on to your next item?
Yeah, so Mr. Chairman, next item number 6, I think that, for the folks that have been here for a while, every time we do local government distributions and you look at the formula, there's always some anomalies in there that we can't explain. And so what we wanted to do is go back and look at, there's like 9 different criteria in that local government distribution formula. It hasn't been updated for over a decade. There have been different amendments that modified it. So you had the original Madden formula, and then it was amended in about 2018 to the Madden Bebout formula. And then last year, we added another version on that with the Madden Bebout Hicks formula. And then conversations with the chairman of House Appropriations, we were talking about some of the anomalies that show up. It's probably time to go back and relook at that formula and see if it's as applicable today as when it was first put together, and try to understand better what some of those nuanced things are in there and why we get these anomalies in there. And one of the concepts there that we had really envisioned too is maybe even bringing in some statisticians from either the university or one of the community colleges to help us put together a more reflective model of what should be, what we want as a legislature in that model. So that's why that's on there, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Questions for the senator on the panel? Do you have any more?
Yeah,
Senator
Mr.
Hicks?
Chairman, so item number 6, and I actually think that item number 1 was something my guess is Representative Harshman put on there, but it dovetails into item 7. And after I submitted item 7, that was specific to look at the development of investments accounts, spending policy, reserve accounts, challenge match, and to develop a statutory framework specifically for the Wyoming tourism and outdoor recreation account. I believe that was the original House Bill 74. But when you start looking at that, after the exercise that took us almost 3 years to get to what was House Bill 89, and then the budget where we've done the 5 and the 7X reserve accounts, it seems at this point in time, we've got the Cultural Resource Trust, we've got the Wildlife Natural Resource Trust, we've got this Tourism Outdoor Recreation Trust Fund. Maybe we should come back and look and see, are we maximizing our investment returns on those? Do we need to set up a spending policy or a reserve account because most of those are income driven. And also currently, most of them right now have no way to inflation clears themselves, because it's just like with the Wildlife Natural Resource Trust Fund, if they have a good year, all the earnings go into the spending or the earnings account, which they can expend. Now that trust fund board is at least once and maybe twice, they've taken some of that and dumped it back into the corpus. They did that this year to match some of the money that we put general fund there, but there's no mechanism to do that. So given the 2-year effort, that almost 3 years to get us to what we did with the Permanent Mineral Trust Fund, it seems like we would want to go back and look at those now and see if there's a way that we can do the spending policies, look at reserve accounts, how we inflation proof those, and then try to buffer those to get a higher rate of return. Because if you add all of those 3 up, we're potentially looking at over $300 million. And so even 1 or 2% interest increase on investment earnings is big. And so that's what that would do. I think that dovetails right into what topic number 1 is.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Groot.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I think the good majority floor leader spelled it out pretty well. The only thing that I would ask of the committee is if we do decide to undertake that, which I hope we do, that we do it at the first part, either the first or the second meeting. So then we can, if we can set that, get that governance and get that structure set up as much as possible with regard to the outdoor trust fund, then we could get it in the second half of the interim back to TRW so they can kind of put their stamp on it as well. And then some of it, because we kind of, when we passed 74, we left a couple things hanging as far as some other, ways to, to kind of put it all together. So it'd be great if we could get that structure, what this group feels that structure would be the best. And as the majority floor leader said, kind of a template for these trust funds, which are growing in size and scope, then we can put it out to TRW so they can kind of take a look at it on the back end.
So, Mr. Chairman,
Yep.
and to facilitate that, I think what we would have to do is the first thing we would want to do is just talk to the CIO and the state treasurer and say, just like we did with once we failed the constitutional amendment 2 years ago, and we brought back this other thing and request of them to come back and say, with the access they have to the consultants, RVK, and then the IFC is to come back and say, take a look at these, make a recommendation how we can increase our rate of return by doing the very similar thing that we did. And then hopefully they'll provide some structure as to what it takes, 3X, 5X, to deal with those, if we want to do reserve accounts, to do that. And so I guess it'd be up to the chairman and vice chairman, but that's something we need to get on the state treasurer's office ASAP if we want to take that up at the first.
Any other members want to weigh in on this topic? This is kind of in your wheelhouse, Chairman Harshman. Yeah.
I think, Mr. Chairman, I think the spending policy thing is going to be really interesting in the next few years. Maybe you've talked about it, I don't want to repeat it with fixed, so I don't want to get into that. You've all talked about it. So I think we'll have to be nimble on that. We used to have a spending policy of 12% one time and then 8% when I first came into the legislature. So, I think the 5% thing, and I think we ought to also look at the 5-year average. It's very conservative, which is good. But it really drops at a point lower than what it actually is. It's about 4% when you do a 5-year rolling average. But I appreciate the Wildlife Trust Fund. I think that's the biggest part of Pool A. If we can get that working harder. Yeah. And then I think the investment kind of center, that House Bill 244 a couple years ago. I don't know if I see it in here, but it's, I just think this whole idea, we've got these 2 investment groups, one for retirement and one for our state, and they never even get a meet at the water fountain, I just think there's always been this idea of locating them, not together and working together, but at least kind of where they run into each other a little bit and can have some synergy. But anyway, those are things I've thought about.
Senator Hicks, you have a
Yeah.
follow-up?
Yeah.
Use your microphone.
Mr. Chairman, and just for Steve, what we were talking about is even a little broader than just a spending policy, but also look at, after going through the reserve account stuff, is to try to get a recommendation on how we would increase our rate of returns, even it may be setting up reserve accounts. And just hypothetically, we may have the ability to do that because these are non-constitutional trust funds. We could actually move some of the stuff out of the corpus now into reserve account, freeze up, get into your spending policy that would then allow them to invest in higher rate of returns. So all that stuff is what we want to look at, is the structure on how we can better increase our rate of returns. And it'd be the Wildlife Trust Fund, be the Cultural Resource Trust Fund, and then also this new trust fund that we have with the Outdoor Recreation and Tourism Trust Fund that we set up with House Bill 74, and start to look at how we would structure those to maximize those returns in light of the experience that we've had in the last couple of years. And then I would concur, Mr. Chairman, on another thing. It's a topic that we need to include as a continuation of House Bill 244, because it had some broader implications there, not just on the two systems, but also long-term on how we provide management oversight and investment policies associated with utilizing the IFC and how that's structured. And so that was part of House Bill 244 2 years ago. We need to continue to work on that, because that was a section is just that we looked at how we actually authorize utilizing IFC, the SLIB board, and the state treasurer, and then the CIO and the investment people on how that structure. Senator Gruey, you'll remember that we need to continue that work. You can.
I think, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, and I agree, and I think, we're not the first folks to do trust funds. Back in the 70s, that was a big deal. Our predecessors were trying to build a lot of trust funds. Then we got broke, and then that kind of fell out of favor a little bit. There was an attempt to kind of swallow those back up a little bit, and I think we're, I just think the more things we can kind of move off the general fund, the better. And so I think we've got some unique opportunities with that. The other thing I wanted to talk about, I've been wearing this little button for last week, and I don't think, this was my freshman year in 2004. I ran this $100 million deposit because we were getting Jonah gas and coal bed methane, and to put $100 million in the permanent trust fund. And back in those days, you didn't have the appropriators sit on the joint conference committees. Usually you'd have one appropriator, and I was a freshman. Speaker Parity put me on it. Says, hang on to that $100 million. And then, we were so broke, we were spending the 1% statutory because we had to pay our bills. But then we realized, boy, if we could save the 1% statutory and maybe deposit $100 million a year, where can we get to? Well, the permanent trust fund was $2 billion then, and the school was $1 billion, and we said $4 billion by 2010. And I think this committee too, I think we ought to set some goals for our rest of our colleagues, to kind of that we can all rally behind, so they don't go, where did this come from? Is this an appropriations tactic or somebody sneaking something up on us? But we'll kind of get a plan to where can we be in 2030? And, because when we did this in 2004, 2010, it was like, 2010 will never be here. It'll never happen. Boom,
Chairman Harshman, is this related to Senator Hicks's?
I don't know if it is, but I'm just talking about topics. But I just think, I don't think what Larry said, no.
Just go for it.
But I think this rate of return though, and how we get let's have a plan to grow and kind of get the end in mind. I think what Larry said is right. And I think let's just, have a plan. And I think we can lead that and get our colleagues behind it. So I think 20 by 30.
Senator Hicks, you want to wrap up the discussion on your
No,
244?
Mr. Chairman, those were the 4 items, and like I said, I think number 1 is part of number 7.
Yes.
Exactly what we want to do, but we want to look at those other trust funds in addition to just the wildlife trust fund.
All right. So any other members have a topic that's listed here that they want to speak to?
Mr. Chairman?
Representative Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item number 4 on the handout, the ESG practices and policies. And there was 2 bills that came through this session that had great ideas, but had great difficulties also embedded within those. And I think this would be a good committee, being that it's the Finance and Investment Committee. How do we make sure we can have an ESG policy or an anti-ESG policy, or whatever you want to call it, while not affecting our rate of return to our own investments, and don't want to cut off our nose to spite our face kind of a situation here. And so having a a Wyoming solution to this versus an out-of-state bill that was produced and handed to us, I think is very important and something that will be an ongoing concern. So that, again, that's item number 4 that I would entertain putting forward as a topic.
Any other comments on this particular subject? Senator Grew.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree. I think we need to do it. And I think that when you talk to the bringer of the two bills, it was a great concern, about just jumping into that, jumping in and what the unintended consequences could be. I think this group would be great if we took a holistic look at that and really did talk about, I think the good representative's onto something there about a Wyoming solution to this problem, that we throw away the cookie cutters, we throw away the boilerplate language, and then we sit down and have a talk about what it is that this state needs and this state wants. Because frankly, I think it could be more of a hybrid situation than we might think, and try to get some folks in and get some ideas and get something that has our stamp on it, that reflects our values, all the state's values. So, yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Anybody else want to weigh in on this topic? How about on any of these others? We have purpose and investment strategy for school foundation program reserve account. Does anybody want to speak to that? Chairman Harshman.
Mr. Chairman, I think, we had that bill this year to do that. And I think, back when we did the LSRA, there was a proposal to do an E-LSRA too. And that's really what the SFRA, I think that's what the Appropriations Committee, I don't want to speak for them, we're thinking that, because it's a little dead-end account we created, 8 years ago or so, that you could put money in, it doesn't flow out. And if we were going to get some surpluses, to store it in there and invest it. But I think that bill that came over, did a bunch of tips and whips, that's not going to build up. It just won't work, I think, unless we can go back to the original bill. But there's $60 million in there now. It doesn't really matter now. But I think if we can, the big deal, if we can get to 7X on these reserve accounts and then start tipping, our world's going to change in a hurry. It's going to be amazing.
Anyone else?
Just
Senator
a
Grew.
comment, on that. We've passed a number of bills this year, and I don't know where, I think you're talking about, Mr. Speaker, it'll always be Speaker to me. 208, yeah, and it got amended, and is it in conference now?
Well, yeah, I think we've got 3. I don't know if you have.
This is
Okay.
the half a loaf.
But I guess what I would say is, maybe that would be a kind of a good jumping off point, is to take a look at all the bills that passed and see where we are. If nothing else, we get to redraw the goldenrod, depending on what passed, just to be able to put that together, but to see how they interact together, make sure that they're all doing what we set out to do, what this committee set out to do with that suite of bills last year. How many passed, what didn't, what were the hits and misses? I know we had dueling amendments on 208, and I don't even say how that all worked out. But and then holistically, once again, we look at all that, and then we see, okay, where do we go from here? What does it get us? Did it get the intended result? Or are we going to get there with that? And if we need to do more, what?
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
I actually think that's just an outstanding idea, Senator, because you've got House Bill 89, which was a reserve account bill. You got the budget. You got House Bill 64, Senate File 66, House Bill 208. All of those dealt with diversions and transfers, and and we need to understand, as the Cap-Fin Committee, where did we miss the mark? What the amendments do? How did they affect the outcome that we were projecting? And then what didn't get done that's still resolved? Because, and having gone through that process, we still have 3 of those that haven't even had conference committees yet, which is House Bill 64, Senate File 66, and House Bill 208. So we don't know what the final disposition and what those may do. So I think, and particularly for the newer members of Cap-Fin, to walk through that and say, this is what the budget did, this is what each one of those did, this was the original bill, here's what the amendment, because I think it will start to help you galvanize an understanding of what's been done, and then all the flows, and then what didn't get done, and how each one of these interact with each other. So I think that's an excellent idea, Senator Naru.
Anyone else on this subject? So there's
Mr.
one more.
Chairman, I see our budget and fiscal people over there just scratching notes vigorously down.
Let's see, there's one more item on here, constitutional amendments pertaining to investment earnings. Does anybody want to speak to that one? Keep trying.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman. Yeah, no, we tried that a year ago. It failed in the Senate. The definition that we currently have is interest and not earnings, and it's significant when it comes to investment strategies and stuff. But I'd put that as a really, really low priority in light of all the other things that we've done. And that we tried that and failed. It's still something that I know, just visiting with the chief executive, he still thinks that's the way we should have done it, but we tried that and it didn't work. I would rather focus our time as to what we have accomplished, what's unresolved with the current methodology that we've got in place, and make sure that that's operating appropriate. Again, I think if we did, that's a low priority, in my opinion.
Anyone else want to weigh in on that one? So, committee, does anybody else have other topics they want to add to this list? Okay, I have one, but I think it fits with number 9, and that's the goldenrod review and, the impact of all the different bills that have been passed, and it dovetails with a topic that I had turned into the management council to direct to this committee, and it didn't really show up on this list today, but mine was to look at the goldenrod in terms of simplification of the goldenrod in our processes so that we create more literacy in our bodies. But I think that fits with number 9 pretty well. See, as we go through, what we've done and how we might simplify that goldenrod, taking a look at that document. I'm adding number 9 because his House Bill 244 was number 8, and then. Sorry, folks. And so number 9 was me adding the simplification piece to the goldenrod review, which Senator Hicks talked about. So,
Mr. Chairman, anything that you can help improve the literacy, particularly speaking from personal circumstance, that would be very welcome. I can't speak for the rest of the Senate.
I think there's some. There's some frustration in the House over the issue of trying to make sense out of the goldenrod. So I think it would be good for us to take a look at that, see if we can do some things.
Mr. Chairman, do you have like a starting point with like a white rod or something like that?
Well, I do. I actually do, Senator, and so maybe we'll I think it'd be a good place, along with these other top priorities for our first meeting, that would fit into that in the first meeting timeframe too. So, all right. The committee have anything else before we open it up to public comment on any of these subjects? Senator Hicks.
So, Mr. Chairman, this is a pretty extensive workload. And typically, CAPFIN has had 3 one-day meetings, and on occasion a little more than that. So I think that when I look at this agenda, I'm honestly, I think the 3 two-day meetings is maybe, we need to go request that from management council. If we don't need it, we don't need it. But what I'm afraid of is if we don't start out that way, we're going to run ourselves short. And then you have to go back and ask management council on the fly for additional time. So as the 2 chairmen, you'll be presenting this to management council, but I would recommend that you would ask for 3 two-day meetings of the CAPFIN committee, and then we'll go from there. We capture that, Ian, as part of the request. But that's my recommendation to the committee.
Committee, what's your thought on that? Anybody want to weigh in? See heads nodding one way or the other? Okay.
I think, Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
we've got 9 things here. Are we gonna do 9 things?
Well, I think that's what we're trying to talk about right now. Do we want to do 9, or can we pare it down to where we don't have to ask for so many days?
Well, combine, yeah.
Senator Steinmetz, are you,
Well,
Talking to the group, or-
and we struck so there's actually less than that, Mr. Chairman. We constitutional amendment, we said that's a low priority.
okay, that goes away. So, and then 1 goes
1
with
and 7
7.
are the same.
Right.
What about 2? What do we cite on that?
That goes with 1, well, I have as 1, what did we do in 2023? And so a recap, and that connects us back to 2, because we did actually, there's pending House Bill 208, which deals with this account. And so I think when we get that update from LSO and analyze what we did in 2023, with a note, or an asterisk reminder to evaluate this as part of that deep dive of what we did in 2023, I think that's where that goes.
Can you say that again? I didn't quite follow where you were taking it.
So number 2, we
Uh-huh.
have a number of bills that deal with the School Foundation Program Reserve Account. One
Right.
of them currently pending on a conference committee on House Bill 208.
Oh, yeah. True.
So I put that under what I perceived to be as one of the topics, which is kind of a recap of what we've just done and get a better understanding of that, because we did a lot of big bills this year,
Mm-hmm.
and just reorient ourselves to what we've done and where we're going from here. And that's
Right.
part of that big picture.
Mm-hmm.
So, Mr. Chairman?
Senator Hicks?
It looks to me, based on that explanation from Senator Nethercott, which I agree with, is really, we've got 1 as kind of an update. I mean, it'll take a couple hours to walk through all that, but there's really no action to do. It's more just understanding the implications and what was resolved and unresolved. So when we get down to, now we're down to really 6 topics. But I still think that to do these and do these right, it would be wise to ask for 3 2-day meetings, and then if we don't need them, we don't need them.
Any comments from the committee? In addition to this, we have the updates from the treasurer's office and what they're up to, and that's a big learning curve too, when you start looking at the investment side of this and what they're up to and our oversight of that. So, Representative Walters,
Are we wrapped up on this topic, ready to move to another topic?
do you have one to present to us?
Not for the list, but I think for an ask of Management Council that all members on this committee be compensated and allowed to go to the Treasurers Conference.
Okay.
If they so desire, it's not a mandatory meeting, but just to have that out there so Management Council can review it.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone else? So I think, well,
And I would concur with that, and so if you get an opportunity, I believe when I talk to the treasurer, that's gonna be back in Jackson Hole. And if they piggyback off of the Federal Reserve has a global, and we've done this in the past where we've had the chief investment officer from New Zealand and BlackRock, and you have access to those people. If you get an opportunity to do that, it is well worth the time to go to go to the Treasurers Conference. So I would encourage new members to do that. And I think we just included, historically, they've done that, but we need to remind Management Council to include and the Treasurer's Office usually covers the expenses for the meeting, but we still, if you want the per diem and the travel, they'll cover the motels and the registration and stuff, but. What's that? They charge us. Yeah, well, they may, but I know they pick up the tab, and then I think LSO does it. So you don't turn it in as part of your personal expenses.
But the Treasurer's Office charges.
so committee, and Senator Hicks, I want to roll back to number 6 and see how strongly you want to argue for including that this time around. I think if there's anything that could possibly drop off, maybe it's that one, but love to hear what you have to
I
say.
would put it as a low priority. I
Mr.
actually
Chairman?
think if we wanted to do that, the way to do that would just to assign a subcommittee to come back and then make a recommendation to maybe do it that way if we decide we want to take it up.
Okay. Anyone else?
Mr. Chairman, this is Ian, sorry.
Yeah, Ian.
I can offer one thing, and that is just that, to keep in mind that the select committee, unlike some others, have a list of statutory duties, and I think we're fairly familiar with what those are, but they are somewhat more limited than one of the standing committees in that we actually have a statutory list as opposed to a more analogous group that's in a broader topic. So and I can go over those if you want. I don't know if you want to take time to do that, but that might provide some guidance to the committee.
Talk to us for a minute on that.
Okay, sure. 2811-201 creates the Select Committee on Capital Financing and Investments. Said the Select Committee shall select from among its members a chairman, et cetera. We have 5 statutory duties: to monitor the establishment and implementation of state investment policy by the State Loan and Investments Boards, to monitor the establishment and implementation of state capital finance policy by the State Building Commission and any other state entity charged with capital financing, to prepare and submit recommendations to the legislature, including sponsoring legislation to improve statutes related to investments of state and local government funds, to develop a knowledge and expertise among its members, and to monitor state fund investments for a specific public purpose authorized or directed by the legislature. So that's our list.
Sounds like a pretty robust list, Ian. So we have a lot of responsibilities. And I will get together with you on that, to try to give some direction to what we do this interim along with the co-chair. And anyone else have anything to say? Co-chair? Okay, would anybody in the public care to weigh in on any of these topics?
Or agencies or executive branch.
Agencies, executive branch? Don't see anyone. Oh, you have to get out of here.
Yeah, I think you guys know where we're at, so we have to run.
Okay. See you later.
Wait a minute. When you two walk away, I get nervous. Where do you go?
We have a scheduled 3:30 caucus.
Oh, I thought it was another water committee meeting.
The Senate has a caucus. Senator Murphy.
Oh.
I think we're close enough that we got.
Oh, yeah, yeah. We'll do it. No,
You need to go, Mike? Nah, they leave me outside the door, eating bonbons.
okay. Tell us who you are, who you represent.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'm Betsy Anderson. I'm the Deputy Chief Staff and General Counsel for Governor Gordon, and I don't know what to think that when I get up here, half the people leave, but that's okay.
Nothing personal.
I just have some kind of random thoughts, so I don't want you to take this as if I don't speak to something, the governor doesn't support something, but just understanding where he's at. We did put in for the incentive comp review. That is very important for the governor. It's been in place about 3 to 4 years, and he feels like just transparency with government. It is a lot of money, and it was discussed at JAC earlier and mentioned that these are becoming some of the highest paid professionals in the state. And so just an overview, concerns there's some self-reporting elements, and really maybe an outside third-party independent audit would not be a bad idea in a review of how those programs are set up. And then Senator Hicks did bring up the back office. And I did not discuss that earlier, but that is a very important element. And Governor Gordon was in favor of that when he was treasurer. And that is something that did not happen. And having worked in that office, because I was the general counsel there for about 15 years, there are definitely morale issues when you have people that are paid that much and that are getting bonuses on top of it. But the other thing I think you can see from the last 2 years, the importance of the back office and what they do for the state to ensure that we know where our money is and where it's there and those types of issues. So we would very much love for that to be part of a review, an interim study on incentive comp. With regards to Representative Walters' comments about ESG, very much what he said, Wyoming solutions to Wyoming problems. The bills this year were national bills. An analysis of the impact of that to what it means for the state when you consider that the investment income is one of the top 3 sources of revenue for the state, and sometimes some quarters it is the #1 source of revenue for the state. So I think we have to be very mindful of what that means for the state. I do think that one element that could really be looked at is proxy voting. Proxy voting, what that would take and what that would mean and what type of impact that might have, but the resources it would take to do that. I think an analysis of that would be a great idea and is an element of ESG. And then the last thing I'll just say is we're happy with fewer buckets of money. It's a lot, I know we have like the Lizra and the Bra, and I think we have some buckets of money that kind of duplicate each other, and having worked the treasurer's office, it creates a lot of complications to move that money around. And that's where you can come up with some problems as to not knowing where your money is. And so we're all for fewer buckets of money. So if you have any questions, let me know.
Thank you very much. Committee, you have any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Come on up, say who you are, who you represent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Darren Westby, Director, State Parks and Cultural Resources. Don't normally get in front of this Capital Finance Committee, so I look forward to working with you in the early part of the interim, and then probably going forward once the governance piece out of the Outdoor Recreation and Tourism Trust Fund kind of grows up a little bit, and we see where we're going to take the governance piece in the latter part with TRWCR committee, but working up front with you all to help develop the spending policies and setting up the account. So really appreciate the work this session and where we're going to take that trust fund, as well as the Cultural Trust Fund, which is also within my agency as well, as Senator Hicks brought up as well. And I'd sit for
Thank you.
questions.
Any questions? Okay,
Thank
thank you
you.
very much. Anyone else? Come on up, identify yourself, who you represent.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Pete Obermueller, Petroleum Association of Wyoming. Thanks for the opportunity. It's my 10th legislative session and first time in front of the CapFin committee, so happy to be here. Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to highlight the ESG topic, and I wanted to highlight it because I think you all know minerals, revenue, corporations have all put this on their interim list. PAW would strongly prefer that it gets corralled into this committee. And so for those of you that know anybody on management council, that'd be helpful. The reason why we asked for that is because the topic can get unwieldy very fast because there's so much distraction when it comes to ESG, in part because there's no definition of what that is. And because there's no definition, the vacuum is filled a little bit by activism. And so from our standpoint, I'm not afraid of ESG. Many of my members have ESG policies and are working towards various goals there. And so that's fine. But what's really important, I think, to this committee and to Wyoming is not only taking a careful look as what's been spoken about already about what does it mean, what does it mean in terms of Wyoming's investment returns and investment options, but also what role does Wyoming play as the 35th, 34th largest sovereign wealth fund in the world in terms of being a player at the table regarding this. And I'm glad Ms. Anderson brought up the proxy voting. So, for example, there's a activist investment organization out of the Netherlands that is totally fine. They work on investing in oil and gas companies, and then they offer sort of anti-oil and gas resolutions in oil and gas companies. And then those are voted on by investment managers everywhere, including Wyoming's. And so take, for example, the one that organization offered with respect to Scope 3 emissions, emissions of downstream uses of oil and gas. They offered one over the objections of Chevron's executive team, and investment fund managers, including some of Wyoming's, voted in favor of that. And so there's a question of what is Wyoming's role in this larger conversation. And it's for us, it's not really theoretical. There's real issues at play here, and so I think taking that topic head on is important for this committee. But I strongly believe, and I think I said it to House Appropriations, that I don't believe that Wyoming's investment portfolio should be the arena of every single cultural battle. Narrowly focused like this committee would be helpful. I did have the opportunity, Mr. Chairman, to speak to the comptroller in Texas, and he and his office indicated that they'd be willing to come talk to this committee about their experience. They've had a bill in place for 2 years, so I know we want to do a Wyoming solution. I wholly agree with that. There might be some things that we can learn about their experience in Texas after having 2 years into it already. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Questions from the panel?
Thank you.
Thank you. Come on up. Tell us who you are, who you represent. Jeremiah?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Jeremiah Riemann here on behalf of the County Commissioners Association. Heard reference to direct distribution. I'll just say my members on the county side have not expressed any issue to me about the current direct distribution formula. That's not to say that we wouldn't try and prevent you from having a conversation around direct distribution. We'd certainly participate. I'd go back to the members and see if there are any changes that they might like to see, but I also don't see it as a failure if we all come to the same conclusion that at least on the county side, the formula is just fine. So I'll start there. The second piece in terms of your responsibilities, I'm not going to ask that you put this on your topic list, but maybe be a resource for us as we move along. As you know, we had Constitutional Amendment A this last year. We're going to work privately to try and craft what we think that solution might look like for my members, and hopefully would have an opportunity to bring that to you if we need that support to advance something, assuming that we need any legislation to further that authorization. So I put those two things for you, and would be happy to answer any questions.
Could you talk about that second one? Just go over that one again so I understand better what that is.
Absolutely. So Constitutional Amendment A was the voter authorization to allow for local governments to invest in equities in the same manner that the state can. Part of that authorization is a requirement that you all, by 2/3 majority on each house, would grant authorization and the framework for which that would happen. There's some question about whether that authorization already exists under existing framework, so we're trying to work through that. And we're also looking at what other authorizations we might want to ask you for in order to effectuate that constitutional amendment.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Senator, do you have a? No, doesn't look like it. You're just talking. Okay, bidding. Oh, your hand was waving.
Actually, I do.
Chairman, on the direct distribution, I got a feeling this potential list got written up before. I mean, that the bill, what's only 48 hours old now as far as a passed piece of legislation. And at the time, I don't think we knew how it was going to turn out. So I think that was where this came from. I mean, I still think, you know, I think it's on lower on our list, and I think it should be. We got plenty on there, but I think that was where that came from, so.
Okay. Anyone else? Thank you. Anyone else want to weigh in? Okay. Closed testimony. I think, I think the priorities have been pretty well laid out on this list. Unless somebody else wants to speak to it, I think we have pretty good direction for for me and the vice chairman to move forward here. Anyone want to speak to any of these before we adjourn? Okay, meeting adjourned. Thank you very much.